Hi everybody, my name is Caro. I love to read, and today I want to talk to you about this last book I read. I have read many, but this is something it really needed its own video because it's a great book. It's the Song of Solomon of Toni Morrison. Here it's in Spanish, but of course its native language is English. And for those who doesn't know, Toni Morrison is an Afro-American writer, and she won many prizes, but the most important are the Pulitzer and the Nobel Prize in 1993, which is the year I was born. And that's how I get to her actually. I made a few months ago, I made this blog entry about how many women have gotten the Nobel Prize for Literature against how many men. Of course there are not so many, but that's how I got her name. And then it really caught my attention that she was very important among the authors that were reflected there because of her work to show and to document through literature and fiction novels the story of the African diaspora in the US, which I think is kind of important. And for those who doesn't know, or maybe I'm using the wrong term, but when I talk about the diaspora, I mean the African people who were brought not only to the US but to Europe, to even Latin America, but that the black population in these countries, in these continents, comes from Africa as slaves. And let's not forget that at all. I mean, right now, thank God, they have rights and not the best opportunities, I would say, but at least they have better position in front of life. But back then, and let's not forget at all, they come from being slaves, brought to these places by being slaves. And Toni Morrison talks about it and talks about how this impacts not only them, because a lot of people now say, okay, yeah, but that was many years ago and that's already done and they are free now, so they should not complain, which is not necessarily the case. And I think that's one of the relevant points of the story, how this keeps in the memory of generations what's someone suffers there. Of course, it's translated in habits, in ways of seeing life story, in many dynamics and ways of structuring your own thoughts generation by generation. And just as a context too, the Song of Solomon, it's also a book in the Bible. And I'm not an expert, I'm not very religious, but I do remember when I was a kid, I was raised Catholic. So I kind of remember that part in which the Song of Solomon, it was of course a text written by King Solomon from Israel. And he was a very special king because he had, in this very misogynist narrative that they have in Catholicism, at least the way they taught me, he was a very wise man, and he was so wise that he was able to have too many wives and concubines, like a lot, hundreds of them, because he was so great that he could give love to a lot of women. And of course that also entitled him to be the person to talk about love, and that's why he wrote the Song of Solomon, which is a chapter in the Bible. And it's a very specific chapter because it doesn't match with the rest of the text in that book. It's actually a text about love, about like marital love and sensuality even, because of course he was a master because he had 300 wives. And well, that's the context, and I'm giving it to you because also by having 300 plus wives, of course he had 300 plus kids, and that at some point gave him trouble. In the Bible is written as of course the wives were from different towns, so they adore different gods, so he had to start adoring different gods, and by doing so God got mad at him. And well, that's the really point, but let's talk about that. Like I said, in terms of power, your power dilutes the more wives and the more gods you adore. And then he had a lot of kids, and those kids gave him trouble later. But well, that's the background, and I'm sure, and I'm speaking overall, like I'm not an expert on this, but of course there's a reason why Toni Morrison named this book The Song of Solomon. And I think it's also because of this key line or frame about the heritage of generations as of life and how do we take decisions. And I remember there is this line in the Bible who says that the decisions you make also impact your generation. So I think it's kind of that the relation between the name and the real book, and I'm not gonna spoil it to you, but the topic is the same. It's all about how the main character is a black man who is in a very comfortable position in the south of the US back in many years ago. But he, despite of course the certain conditions and segregation that the black population was a victim of, he was in a very comfortable position because his father was very wealthy, and in that sense he saw life differently than the rest of the people in his town, because he's so disconnected to the past. I mean, the dad has money now, but back in the days he hadn't, and there's a whole family history behind that he was totally disconnected for. So he was in this kind of a speech that people needs to work because people who's lazy don't make money and blah blah blah. The same discourse that people that has never had to make an effort in their life always have. And throughout the book, don't want to spoil it, so I'm just gonna take it very generally, but he starts getting in touch with his past, with the past not only from his parents but also from the family around his parents, grandparents, grandparents, and how this goes very very back to the moment in which they were slaves, all the violence that they had to swallow basically. And he realizes also how that impacted in the relationship of their parents with him. So it's all about this heritage, and my personal lecture here is also how we need to be conscious of that. Right now I know a lot of discourses in which we say, yeah, okay, but the slavery was very very long ago and they should not be complaining anymore, and you have to own your own life. But the truth is, these people, and not only black people but people who has suffered not directly but probably their fathers, their grandparents and grandparents, are always carrying some emotional baggage that, yes, of course you can work on it and own it and make it your tool of growth instead of something that makes you a victim, yes, but not everybody has access to this kind of resources of even not only psychologists but the resources to own these kind of things, because some people doesn't even know it. So I think that's the main message here, how the damage, all the violence that America infringed to black people many decades ago still is fresh now, and also how some of the hate that has been harvested across generation comes from the very roots of the start of this esclavism in the US, and how it's easy to judge sometimes, I think. And also I'm speaking as a Mexican woman that doesn't live in the US but a Mexican woman. We tend to be put in these boxes of conflicted people or troubled people or people that always gets into trouble, but the real question is why? What happened? What are the distances between social classes, races and stuff that put black people, Latin people, Middle East people, anybody that is not white and American, in this kind of position in which it's easy to get into trouble? And it's not so simple. There are many emotional, historic, economic luggage that keeps us back. So I know I'm talking very superficially or to the rounds and might not be very clear, but I hope when you read the book it makes all sense. But I think it's a great book. In summary, I would really recommend you to read her. If not this book, any other, but it's great. Like when I was reading about her, it was not very clear to me. They were saying like, yeah, she's great reflecting the history of black people in the US, and I was like, yeah, but there's a lot of people who does that. But now that I read it, it's a masterpiece. It's really amazing how he makes in between all these lines that I just mentioned you a real story in which you have a plot, but there are also many signs and hidden messages in between. So I really urge you to read it. If you have, please share it with me, and if not, well, if you get the chance, please do, and also tell me in the comments. You can also follow me on Instagram. I already told you before, it's a name in Spanish, que lees Caro, which means why are you reading Caro. I know it's difficult to spell, so I'm gonna put it in the description too, and let me know what do you think, and thanks for watching.